to another how-to with Teacup Jojo. Now today I'm going to be talking to you about charts. I know they look a bit like, ancient hieroglyphics or something, and a bit like, oh, how do I interpret those? So I know lots of you have wanted to know how to get to grips with these. So today you won't actually be needing any yarn or hook. You just need a cup of tea or a glass of wine and to sit back and enjoy. Hopefully learn how to read these charts, the basics of how to read them. We will look more in depth another time, but I'm going to give you the basics to get you started. Okay, now with our squares, there are plenty of types of charts to do, your little symbols of hearts and flowers and things, but we're talking squares, aren't we? We're doing granny squares. So as you may have noticed, if you're part of the Facebook group, the Crochet Along, we have squares that go in the round like this. So this is the basic granny square number 1, and this goes in the round, okay? And then we had this one, which was number 34. This was the waffle along square, and this was worked back and forth in rows. So in the round and in the row. Now, episodes number 1 and 2 of the how-tos have shown you a bit about working in the round, working in the row. I'm not going to be talking about how to make those individual stitches today. It's more about how to read from the chart. Okay, so you've got the 2 basic types of square in the round and in the row. And so therefore you've got 2 basic types of charts. This one here, which is in the round, where it works from the centre and radiates out to the outer round. So your rounds go from the centre, so you've got round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one is one in the rows. You can see they're laid out all in nice rows. Okay, apart from this final one, which is going around. Okay, another way to identify, if you don't know, if you can't tell immediately, if you haven't seen a picture of the square, is to look for your starting chain and or magic circle. So if you look at this one here, you can see you've got your chain here in the centre. So that would be your starting chain. And if you look here, where's the starting chain? Here we go, starting chain here. So this is all the way along here, and then you've got your turning chain, so you know that this is in the row. Okay, that's the basic way to tell where to start in a chart, is to find your starting chain. Occasionally you will find charts have numbers, they'll have numbers beside the rows, or in the round it will have we'll have numbers of the rows as well, indicating where to start. So we are going to start with square number 1, the basic granny square, which is this one. So let's get this here. I always get better light on a lighter background. So here is the chart for the basic granny square. Now let me zoom in. On that. Oops. There we go. How's that? That's better. So let me get my granny square here. This is my nice bright blue one. Okay, my granny square there. So if you the only thing you really need to know on charts is stitch symbols. Now in the group we have got some things a little bit like this, which is cheat sheets, and tells you a bit about various stitches, and at the bottom you've got a crochet key. Now unfortunately the one I printed out is the UK version, and we're using US stitches, so the symbols are all the same but the stitch name is different, so you just need to get a copy of that in the US terms, and then you'll be flying away. But there's the basic stitches we're using for the granny square are, if I just show you here, you need the loop, which is a chain. There'll be a little dot, which is your slip stitch, and then the other is this T with a bar, and that's your double crochet. Okay, so obviously these have got a different name, well, this has got a different name in the UK. You will also see some of these in future charts. Oops, that's got 3. So that's a treble, that's a double treble, and then if you see this one without a bar, that's a half double crochet. Okay, so ones with hats are ones that you do a yarn over with. This indicates yarn over, so 1 yarn over, 2 yarn overs, 3 yarn overs before you go into your stitch or ring. This doesn't have a bar, but it's got a hat, so you know it's got a yarn over. And that's basically all you need to know. You could see a really tall stitch with, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that could be a double, triple, treble or something. You don't need to know the name. You just need to know how many yarn overs to start with, and then you're away. So that's really all you need to know. Yeah, and then once you've got, you know, your symbols, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, if it's got these definitions in Russian, Italian. If you know the symbols, you can follow the chart generally. So whereas a written pattern, if it's in a different language, well, yeah, toss it aside and try a different pattern. So that's basically what you need to know for this. So let's have a look at this and get started. So you would look for the centre, and this shows a funny little squiggle which indicates a magic ring. As you know, you can do, we try and tell you this all the time, you can do 4 chains and then slip stitch into your first chain and make a ring from your chains and work into that instead. So there's no stitch here, so there's no nothing to actually go into, so you're just going to do all these stitches into your ring. Okay, and that's how most squares in the round would work into a centre ring. Okay, now this tells you the rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Quite helpful. But because these chains are on the side, I like my charts upright, so I'm just going to turn it and be a rebel. Let me just zoom in slightly more. There we go. How's that? That's better. Okay, so I'm sorry it's a bit faint. My printer's having a bit of a breakdown, I think. So the first thing you would do is look for your chain. So as you know, for most of our patterns, you would do a chain of 3 to get up to the height of your first stitch. So you would do your chain of 3, and then you would do your 2 double crochet all into this ring. Now I did that, I think, because let's just do these chains here. You can identify them. So you've got 3 chains, and then you're going to do your 2 double crochet, and then you've got your chains for your corner, and then your next 3 double crochet, corner chains, next 3 double crochet, corner chains, next 3 double crochet, corner chains, and then your slip stitch. Now you would see from here, it's right at the top here, so you would go into your top chain, bringing this corner level with those, just as it is all the way around, and that would be your first round complete. Simples. So that's your first round. Your second round would start usually from where your slip stitch finished. Okay, if you saw some slip stitches, little dots for slip stitches, it would indicate that you've got to slip, slip and start here, but there aren't any. So, but you've got a chain, so that means you're going to work up here, do this chain. You can see there's 3 there, indicating again that it's another double crochet. But then there's another chain here, and that's to indicate your chain space. Okay, and then you're working around. This time you can see you're working these stitches into this chain space, not into any chain. It doesn't particularly specify that. If you ever see stitches above a chain, it will pretty much 99% of the time be going into that space. So if I show you here, here's your corner space, it will nearly always be working in that space, not in each individual chain. Okay, so you're going to do your corners and your chains, make this corner into this space, and then you'll do your chain, and then your 3 double crochets, your 3 chains, 3 double crochets, and then your 1 chain, 3 double crochets. Oh, but what happens here, this suddenly doesn't have this bar. They don't have these bars, and this doesn't show 3 chains. It's just kind of plain lines. That's a bit confusing. Well, the difference is when we work in the round, which I think in episode 1 I told you a bit about this. Episode 1, 2, that most squares are symmetrical. If you look at this, it is symmetrical. You can't see a lot of that there. I've zoomed in, but mostly it is symmetrical. You could fold it that way, you fold it that way, or that way, and it will all be the same. You know, even if it's, let me find a fancy square, this one here, okay, this one here, it's basically, you've got those lines of symmetry going, let me zoom out, there we go, you've got these lines of symmetry going along, and it doesn't really matter which way you fold it, it's the same all the way around. So, just to save themselves needing to copy all of this, they've just done this plain, because if I pop that pin there, all of this, these 2 sides are the same along here as well. So if you ever see this, don't get confused and think, has it changed to a half double crochet? To show you this, look, the half double crochet with no line. No, it hasn't. It's exactly the same. It's just indicating that that's where they are, but follow this side. Okay, I know it has been slightly confusing for some of you. It's a bit of a different one, but mostly the patterns that we're doing now, people on our team are charting them up for us, and they're doing every single stitch, so it's a lot clearer to see. So let me zoom in again. There we go. So that's kind of how you follow it. You go, you do your round, and then you do your slip stitch at the end of the round, and then you would do your next chain or stitch, whatever it implies, indicates. Work around, do your next slip stitch, follow that next chain, do your round until you find your slip stitch, to close that round until you move on to the next round. And it's pretty much as simple as that. You're just looking for where these stitches are, and you can see in this pattern, you've probably done the basic granny square already, which is square number 1. All of the stitches in the basic granny go into spaces and not into actual stitches. So it's really pretty simple, and this chart shows you that exactly, going into all these spaces and nothing going into stitches. And that's how you'd follow the basic granny chart. That's how you get going with charts. Okay, let me see if I can zoom out a little. There we go. So, moving on to square number 2, which was the X granny. You've got this X going on here. It's this way and that way. I really need to get my squares blocked. Anyway, this is our X square. And this is a chart by the same place we found the other chart for the basic granny. And you can see that again, half of this is just lines, and the other half is actually the symbols. So this is pretty much the same as the basic granny, in that you can see here you're starting with your magic circle, magic ring, and then for this one you do 4 double crochets into that ring, and then you do 4 chains. This one's much more gappy than excuse me, than the basic granny. So again, you would do exactly as you did for the basic. You would go into this circle, whether you've done your magic circle or whether you've done your chain of 4 and slip stitch. So you would do your double crochets, and then your chains, double crochets, chains, double crochet, chains, all the way around, starting here, with your chain of 3, which is your first double crochet. which you'll remember if you watch the videos. You'll hear us say that so many times. So you've done that and you go around and you finish here with your corner, and you can see here there is a dot for your slip stitch. So you slip stitch into there as you normally would, and then you would do your chain of 3 for your double crochet, and then you do, for this one it's chain 2 for your spaces. You look here, your spaces are much bigger. Okay, and then you move across, and this is for right-handed, left-handed, move across this way. So you would move along and you would do your next stitches. Remember, when you're working in the round, you're always needing to make your corners for the squares. So you would have 2 sets of stitches going on in the corner. There are exceptions to that, and I will show you in a few minutes. But here you can see that you've got your stitches into the corner, and then you've got your chains, and then more stitches into that corner. That makes your space, and then you move along and you do exactly the same as what you did in for the basic granny. And you see, as you move around these, the chart moves into just using straightforward lines. Now this is because it's exactly the same. All of this is exactly the same as what's on this half. Okay, these 2 sides are exactly the same as these 2 sides. Okay, so they've just saved themselves having to draw all of these symbols. Okay, much easier. So that's how that's so if you ever see this and it looks a bit weird, it's exactly the same as this. Okay, so just look over this side and see what you did, and follow it around, and it should make sense. So the difference comes from this one. You'll move from round to round, finished here, so you'll start here, and you do this round, finish, start again, and then the difference here now is you can see this stitch here is above this stitch here. Now if I show you up here, because it's upright, so if you see here, this double crochet is above this double crochet here. It's not above the chain, it's above this double crochet, and that means you have to do this stitch into this stitch, not into the space if you usually would. You're actually going into this stitch. So if I bring this in here, you can see that this stitch here is going into this stitch below it, and then it shows that you do your 2 chains as usual, and then your next stitch is going into this stitch. So here we go, you've done your stitch into the stitch, 2 chains, stitch into your stitch. Because as I said previously, squares pretty much in the round are symmetrical. So if you've done a stitch this side and you didn't do a stitch this side, it would look a bit strange. So generally what you do in this, where's the middle? The middle is going up through here. So what you do on this half, you will repeat on this half. Okay, so if you saw that it missed this one out and you hang on a minute, that's not going to look right, it might be a mistake on the chart. So you would so say if here it showed two chains, so you did that, did your double crochet, 2 chains, double crochet, but then if there was only 1 chain here, that's not quite right. So you would know that it's supposed to be the same because it's that mirror image going on, so you would know to correct that and do 2 chains. Okay, so that's the other good thing about reading the charts, is that you can see how it's intended to look. Occasionally charts don't fully represent the finished article, but usually you can get an idea of what your finished thing's going to look like, which when you just look at the written pattern, unless there are photos to go alongside it, which thankfully we do have in, I think, in all of our patterns that we give to you each day, unless there are photos there, you've no idea what the finished thing is going to look like. So the charts are really useful for having an idea of you can see this X going on, and it just gives you that really nice idea of what's going on there. So this chart is basically basically the same as the other granny, except that you're going into stitches here. So you can see on this next round that you're going again into these stitches as you go around, and you can see here they're showing going into the stitches and then into the chain spaces. So that's how you would read that one. It's exactly the same as the basic granny for how you read it. The only exception is this going into the stitches rather than into the spaces. So that's that one. So that's square 1, square 2. Only another, what number are we on? 73? Only another 73 squares to go. No, no, we're not looking at all them charts today, no. But I am going to show you a different type of chart in just a second. Okay, so let's move on to something a bit more advanced. Now, these are the patterns that we that some of our team have been making in the crochet along. And what they try and do for us, which is great, is they do every round in a different colour, which is great, because it means we can identify stitch placement, we can identify the rounds, really handy, especially if, like this one, we have some different things going on. You can see which is which round, which is really useful. So let's have a quick look at these. Now, I'm sorry that it's a little bit blurry, but I think some of that's because I tried to enlarge it quite a bit to show you, and also, yeah, I think my printer's having a bit of a funny day. So this is number 41, which we always try and put the name on, the number on, and sometimes the name. And we always use this stitch legend or key, so it tells you what each symbol means, which is really useful. Unlike the other one, you don't have to try and guess. Now, the only one here that you might not have heard of if you encounter the square is you might not have heard of a 6 double crochet cluster. Now, if you have access to the written pattern, this is where that will be useful, because usually you will have a definition of what this stitch is, and obviously if you're using the patterns that we're giving you, then you will have the written pattern as well, so you can confirm what that 6 double crochet cluster is. And in this case, this is where you do the beginning of each double crochet, and then you fasten them all off together. I believe I did the video for that one, I should know. So that's what these bits here are. Okay, so again, it's a 1 in the round. You can see it's 1 in the round. It's all looking quite symmetrical. You've got a starting chain here, and because this one was designed to have this big centre, it has a big chain ring for a start. So let me see if I can zoom in and have a look. Get this here. Okay, there we go. So you can see here that you've got your starting chain, and usually if a pattern can be done with the magic ring, it will show a magic ring rather than a chain. This one designed to have a larger ring, so it shows you the chains, and you can just about see there on camera, I think, the slip stitch. Okay, and then from there you can see that you go up here and do your chain, which would be the start of your cluster. Okay, and then it shows you your cluster here, and again, you, as usually in the ring, you're going to start working into this ring. I bring this in here. All of these were into this ring here. Okay, so you do your cluster into the ring, and then your double crochets, and then your cluster double crochets, and you work round like that, and you do your slip stitch into your chain. And then it shows that you've got another slip stitch here. Now that's because you're going to be working from here. Okay, so you've got a slip stitch there, and you've got a slip stitch there, and the next place you can see a chain is here. And so that's, on this one, we did a slip stitch from our starting chain, we did a slip stitch over into the cluster and then a slip stitch over into the first stitch so that we could work from the first stitch and do our chain up here. Okay, and then as before on our X granny, you can see that we work each of these is going directly into a stitch, so you do those directly into the stitch below and then come across here. Now you can see our corners, they're symmetrical. So you can see here normally you would have a couple of stitches, some chain and a couple of stitches to make your corner. So you can see you've got 2 stitches going into the top of your cluster, a chain to take you around the corner, and then another 2 stitches in your next stitch, and that takes you around that corner quite nicely. And then if you work around here, you'd work around, come to your next corner, slip stitch, and you'd start working again, and you would just follow those stitches around, and it's quite as simple as that really. Charts can look quite frightening, but actually they're not as scary as they seem. So there we go, guys. That's the first part of how to read your crochet charts. I will be back with a second episode of how to read your charts to show you some more advanced things, and also how to read the charts in the row. So if this has been helpful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. All the details of the group are in the description box below. And until next time, just keep hooking and don't let your tea get cold.